Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to recap and review White Lotus, Season 3, Episode 6, Denials. I think I've signaled this a bit in my prior reviews, but I'm finding it a bit difficult to care about these characters, and this episode in particular really made that apparent to me, although there was some really great acting, particularly, in my opinion, from Patrick Schwarzenegger. So without further ado, let's get into this episode, particularly with the most raucous group, the Ratliffs. The episode opens with Tim daydreaming about killing himself, and his wife and daughter finding him. People are going to come for me, but I found these daydreams a bit annoying because it was like the show wanted to benefit from the emotional heights from these types of decisions while also not actually allowing the character to make that decision. Overall, these scenes are meant to express the internal battle waging in Tim's head about what steps he needs to take moving forward. Tim hides the gun in one of the living room armoire sets, which is a beautiful armoire that I would like in my house, and takes another lorazepam. In bed, Victoria tries to comfort Tim, but addresses Piper's meditation dreams and not his actual concerns. He responds, he's not worried in the slightest. Saxon wakes up to Lachlan's ass, a mirroring of the first episode in the season. He's clearly out of it and has no idea what really happened the night before. His primary memory is of him pleasuring himself while Lachlan and Chelsea consummate. Saxon is sick by both the possibilities and the effects of the drug. I also think this is Lachlan, quote-unquote, beating Saxon, since it seems like Lachlan is the one who's able to have the more masculine, penetrative sex with Chloe, and Saxon's not able to do so. When the brothers come back to the family suite, or also, by the way, beating could also be, you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to spell this out for you. When the brothers come back to the family suite, Victoria reveals that Piper has no thesis and wants to live at the meditation center, or the monastery as it's also referred to in this episode. Saxon is shocked, but surprisingly, Lachlan keeps his word and defends Piper's choice. I was just surprised that he actually did that, and I think he's clearly an expert at straddling that line. Saxon is concerned with Piper wasting her life away, and Piper takes a dig at his private equity exploits. Lachlan joins Tim, Piper, and Victoria on the trip to the meditation center, and Saxon doesn't say anything when Lachlan says goodbye. So Saxon can already sense that there's a weird tension between them. When Piper meets with Long Portera, where she talks about feeling lost and aimless. She talks about her bad days, and I wish we could see more about what those days are about and maybe what she's going through at college. Portera agrees to talk to her parents, and conveniently Victoria is not available to speak to Long Portera, and Tim sees Long Portera by himself. And I think it would have been really cool to see Victoria have that conversation, but I know, of course, like plot-wise, there's a reason why there's a decision to have Tim speak with Portera by himself. Tim wants to understand why his daughter is interested in the meditation center. Portera explains that many American kids have spiritual malaise, and they are left with the self and identity to explore. People run from pain to pleasure, but inevitably find pain in the pleasure. Ultimately, you can't outrun pain. This is a parallel analysis to Frank's monologue about his sex addiction. So Frank was trying to pleasure himself basically to death and realized, look, I'm getting more pain by just continuing to indulge in these vices, and ultimately he decides that he's going to turn to Buddhism. So Tim then asks Portera what he thinks happens when people die. And Portera explains that you're separated from one giant ocean at birth, and you become one with the ocean after death. Death thus is a happy return. Tim is clearly moved by Portera's words and appears to have given him some sense of peace about his own life. Tim tells the family he liked Portera, and Victoria is shocked. Victoria claims that Piper is not going to like the meditation center and challenges Piper to stay at the center for one night. And if she does so and she likes it and she still wants to go to the center, she's going to basically allow Piper to stay there without any complaint. It's clear that after her tour of the premises, she believes that Piper won't be able to handle the accommodation. This plot line only works if Piper did absolutely no research on the center and for some reason has no context of what the living conditions are like. Because these types of centers, especially if we're supposed to take Portera's word, there's a lot of Americans there, and I'm sure there's like plenty of vlogs online where people are showing their day-to-day living conditions in that meditation center. So I feel like this isn't something that Piper is going to be shocked by, but the show is clearly signaling to us that Piper is not really ready for this. I'll also say that there's different types of rich white girls, because I've definitely met a lot of rich white girls who you'll tell them, hey, this situation is going to require you not to shower and not to live in a bed or sleep on a bed. You're going to sleep in a sleeping bag and what have you. And me, myself, personally, I don't like doing that. I wouldn't do that at all. But I've met a lot of people, even if they are, very wealthy, who will say that's the experience I want to have. So I also don't necessarily think that Piper is one of those girls who wouldn't be comfortable or wouldn't be able to accommodate herself into that situation. But I think the show's clearly setting us up for Piper to be so ill research and ill intention that she doesn't realize what she's really getting herself into. Either way, Lachlan says he'll stay with Piper, which is definitely a great gesture, although he's likely just trying to avoid Saxon. Back at their suite, Victoria scolds Tim for encouraging Piper to move to the monastery. Victoria wants Piper to fear poverty so that she can make good decisions. This is really insightful and also a scary reality, because 90% of life's decisions are based on the fear of poverty. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are able to make a lot of money basically by giving people poverty wages because of their fear of poverty, which is an irony. Victoria is confident that she wouldn't be able to live with her creature comforts, and she's unable to adapt to an uncomfortable life. And so clearly Tim takes that to heart, and he realizes that he's going to basically shatter Victoria's whole life. Before we get into the conversation with Saxon and Chloe and Chelsea, I want to point out that Patrick Schwarzenegger is, to me, the highlight of this episode. He's able to basically embody his own character, and it's almost like you see Saxon taking Saxon into this black hole of himself, and he does a 180. And I think the show also does this really cool thing where Saxon is now depicted explicitly as a loser, because you see him excessively spraying himself with sunstan, and you see how pale he is. And I don't know if there's actually intentional distinction between the Saxon we saw in the first couple of episodes and the Saxon we see today or in this episode, but it's kind of cool how Patrick Schwarzenegger was able to sort of his facade completely broke in this episode, and he wasn't able to hide the fact that he's basically a loser who is trying to do the right thing, but inevitably did something very taboo and weird, and something that you can't really talk to anybody else about. So at the pool, Saxon finds out that Chloe told Gary/Greg about them and invites Saxon to Greg's house. Chelsea suggests that maybe Greg/Gary wants a threesome, which Saxon claims he does not do with another guy. Chloe gives Saxon a reality check and says that Saxon had a threesome with his little brother the night before. Chloe then reveals that Lachlan was the one to jerk off Saxon. Saxon goes through an existential crisis and turns pale. Saxon tries to blame the drug, but Chelsea says drugs wouldn't be able to get her to have any relations with her siblings. He asks the girls to forget about it, and Chloe says she will, as long as Saxon makes his way to the dinner. At the monastery, Portera leads a meditation, and Lachlan remembers the details of the prior night. Lachlan is shocked to remember that he did in fact jerk off Saxon, and people were describing Lachlan as predatory from the past episode, but it does seem that Lachlan is just as confused and weirded out by the situation as Saxon. But again, it does beg the question, then why did he do it? But who knows what's really going on here. I'm just interested to see how Mike White lands this, because incest is just a very taboo topic, and I don't know how this is going to have an emotionally satisfying ending. And to be clear, I believe emotionally satisfying doesn't mean all rainbows and oh my God, they learn to live with each other, but mainly just how does this get resolved? How do we as an audience be okay, Lachlan and Saxon aren't weirdos who probably should live at the edge of society, right? I'm just wondering exactly how we get to the point where this feels like a necessary plot line to have in this entire season, which seems to be more so about spirituality than it is about tabooness. And I said in my last review that this season was about taboos, and I don't really think that it's about weird pleasures and the things that we do to find ourselves. And I think Saxon basically tries to find himself with this particular ideology about having sex with certain women and this certain dynamic, and you could tell that it's not really satisfying him, and it kind of essentially led him to this really weird relationship now that he has with his brother. And then with Tim and Victoria, we have another daydream where Tim this time shoots Victoria and then himself. So family annihilation, and it's clearly a sort of reflection of Tim seeing that Victoria would not necessarily be able to survive if he's not financially solvent. And Saxon catches up with his dad and is concerned about Tim's mental state, but Tim seems enthusiastic about joining Gary's dinner. So this dinner is clearly going to have a lot of characters, and it's going to be interesting to see if there's going to be some climax that leads to a really inevitably terrible end. So let's get to the Secretive Boyfriends Club with Chelsea, Chloe, Gary, and Rick. On a call with Gary/Greg, Chloe finds out that Greg, I'm just going to call him Greg, is mad that she went on the boat without him. Chloe concludes his real anger is about her hooking up with both of the brothers. Despite making the explicit choice to cheat on her boyfriend on his boat, Chloe's afraid of losing Greg because of the life he's providing for her. Chelsea responds with something about Libra rising, which points to this idea that Chelsea's sort of one of these spirituality girlies who believes in the horoscopes and all that. And I think that this is to point out that Chelsea's sort of the spiritual center. And I would argue with most of these characters here, she always seems to have her head on her heads. Although I'm not really taking her word for it, because why is she with Rick then? Either way, Chelsea and Rick have a conversation, and Rick has to convince Chelsea that he didn't go out. I was not appreciative whatsoever of him saying so fucking annoying to her. I just hate when men, I don't like that. And again, I don't get this relationship at all. I'm not really sure what Chelsea sees in Rick, especially considering that she is so spiritual. And again, Chelsea repeats that bad luck comes in threes. And she said this for at least the past 4 episodes, but we're going to eventually see something happen, I think, to Rick or Chelsea. I just wish that they did something a little bit more with their relationship here, and use these opportunities when they're talking to each other to give us a reason to invest in them. At the pool, Chelsea catches on that Saxon seems freaked out. He's upset that Chelsea wouldn't hook up with him, and Chelsea says that hooking up with Saxon would be empty because he's soulless. It's sad. Chelsea seems to be the most clairvoyant out of all of the people in the cast, and again, I would give her props, but she's with Rick, so I have to question her discretion. At their massive Thai estate, Chloe tries to comfort Greg, but he sees through her and accuses her of sleeping with a brother. Chloe says, they're like little boys. And I'm like, girl, you know that you were on a brink of a crime with having sex with Lachlan, but there you were. Anyway, Greg doesn't let it go and then tells her to invite them to dinner at her house that night. He says he needs to deal with something and needs her help gathering people. So I'm not really sure what Greg has planned. It seems like it's probably around Belinda, but it's kind of scary. What could he really do with Belinda and her son at the house? Maybe he is truly going to just try to like shower her with gifts and a bunch of fancy, luxurious things that she's probably never seen before, and hope that that's enough to make her be like, I can't say no to this guy because he's just giving me money. I also have this thought of maybe Greg is going to maybe say something about funding Belinda's dream to have a spa. So he's kind of he's aware that of what happened between Belinda and Tanya, and he's going to use that against Belinda to buy her silence, essentially. Shratala and Rick meet for lunch, and Rick claims that the director, who's going to be played by Frank, wants to see Shratala in her home to get a chance at potentially getting to know her better and expanding her role. I get Shratala's initial trust in Rick since he is a guest at the White Lotus, which seems to be a very expensive hotel, and therefore it implies a sense of legitimacy. But girl, you need to ask for the name of the producer and Google it. This is made more shocking because there's this really popular scam situation that was coordinated by this Indonesian man that became known as the Hollywood Con Queen. It's a podcast that I really enjoyed as well. And I just doubt Shratala would be so open letting random white men in her home without government names that align with online photos and profiles. So I just feel like Shratala would just be a little bit smarter than just to allow a random man in her home without asking, well, what's the name of this director? What movies has he done before? You're saying this is this huge Hollywood production, but usually if there's a huge Hollywood production, there's like a Variety article about it then. So I was confused by how willing Shratala was in letting Rick and Frank into her home. So before they get to Shortala's house, Rick debriefs with Frank, who is hesitant to participate in Rick's messy scheme. Rick promises not to bring the gun and that he simply wants to tell Jim Hollinger how bad his life was messed up by his father's murder. Again, I'm leaning into this Jim Hollinger fellow being Rick's dad, but we'll have to wait and see. Rick and Frank arrive at the Hollinger estate in a boat. Rick brought the gun despite his promise, and it rightfully frustrates Frank. The Hollinger security guards follow the men into the house, and the episode ends with Rick staring at the house as we hear Jim talk to Frank. I'm very interested to see who's the actor playing Jim Hollinger, and I anticipate some deep conversation between Jim and Rick in the next episode, or maybe episode 8, because sometimes it seems like these episodes seem to elongate out one scene or two, so we'll just have to wait who this Jim Hollinger fellow is. So let's get to the toxic friend group. Kate catches Jacqueline leading Valentine out of the door the morning after their hookup. Kate thinks she can bring her observation to Lori, but is surprised at how Lori takes that information. Lori is immediately upset and says that Jacqueline has not changed from their high school years. I definitely get Lori's frustration, and she's spot on with her assessment of Jacqueline, but her expression comes off a bit annoying, and I don't know why that is. And I hate this because I hate describing women as annoying, especially women who are right, and Lori is right. So I don't see, I get where she's coming from, but I feel like I would just kind of want to gossip with Kate about it more so than bring it up with Jacqueline, although I'm usually a confrontational person, so let me be honest. Maybe I see myself in Lori, and that's why I'm annoyed by her. Kate does not reciprocate Lori's energy at all and clearly regrets giving Lori the deets. Valentine comes to their table at breakfast, and Lori is standoffish and rejects his invitation to the Mai Tai fight. Kate is not pleased with Lori's attitude, and I also agree this is a little immature. I mean, you're 45, as she says herself, so, like, they should know, hey, like, these guys don't owe you anything. They're just here to have fun. Like, you're not dating him in any way, shape, or form. So I wouldn't be that attached to a guy. I would look at him differently, but more so like, all right, let's just have fun then. Let's just do fun times. Jacqueline gets a call from her husband, who explains his unavailability by saying his phone was dead while he was on set. He also claims that he's horny for her, and it seems like Jacqueline is remorseful for hooking up with Valentine, and I think that's why she makes the decision she subsequently makes in this episode. So Lori says she has to say something to Jacqueline, while Kate insists on keeping up good manners. I generally side with Lori on these things. We shouldn't be afraid of confrontation, especially if it is something that we know we're going to resent in our conversations with somebody in the future. But I think Kate has a point in the fact that Jacqueline paid for this vacation. And I think this is why it's always dangerous. While I love great gifts, I love great opportunities, when somebody's paying for something, there is an implicit deference that you have to give to that person. And Lori's clearly saying, I don't care. Funnily enough, Jacqueline is at the pool with them. I was so surprised when she popped up, and I was like, wow, you guys were having this conversation when she was right there. And she asked the girls what's going on. Lori comes out with it, and Jacqueline denies it all. And Lori's basically not accepting Jacqueline's excuses. Lori orders drinks for the group and doesn't allow Kate to reject the drink. And then this just made Lori seem very, I didn't like Lori doing this. I hate when people force people to drink or have fun in that way. Like, let people have fun the way they want to. And Kate seems like she's able to enjoy herself sober. And Kate is basically in the middle of these two pushy people. I was kind of shocked at how gaslighty Jacqueline was being, but I think she knows that this could easily get out to anyone and ruin her marriage. I kind of feel bad for Lori because she's also being mentally manipulated here by Jacqueline, but yeah, if I were in her situation, I just would have recognized, like, Jacqueline's not going to tell me the truth and probably just end the relationship afterward. It's not like they're intimately involved in their lives and their kids carpool with each other or anything. They say themselves they see each other maybe once or twice a year. So it's not that deep for Lori to say, okay, Jacqueline might just be my superficial friend. I can't really trust her with too much, and that's that on that. I'm on vacation, very luxurious space. Let me just enjoy the time that I have left. But yeah, strangely, and I think this maybe is the reason why I find Lori annoying, because even though she rejected Valentine's invitation to Mai Tai, she then brings up to the girls that they should do Mai Tai. And this clearly upsets Jacqueline because Lori brings up being able to see Valentine again. And so Lori's clearly antagonizing things. And then Lori implies that Kate is not honest as well. this idea that, Kate can walk around and lie to people, or at least not be honest about her true emotions. But I think really it's just that Kate's not invested in this at all. I think Kate's like, whatever, I have my church group in Austin to hang out with. You guys are way too crazy. And then Kate tells Jacqueline that Lori's drunk. She's trying to excuse Lori's behavior, but Jacqueline implicates Kate in the gossiping that's negatively affecting her life. So it's clear that there's a rift between these three women. Again, my big question, how are we going to land this? What's going to be sort of the spiritual awareness that these women come to, and how is that going to affect, basically their relationships moving forward? I think it's kind of sucks because we already know that these women are not intimately involved with each other's lives. So in a way, I'm almost not that invested in what happens to them either, because it's like, okay, what's going to happen? You're not going to talk to each other when you leave? That's what you guys were doing before anyway. So it's just going to be interesting to see what the crescendo of all this conflict is going to be. And I will say, yeah, maybe one of them dies, but I have no idea. I would say I don't care, but I do, because Lori and Kate have children. But let's go ahead to the hotel staff and Guy Talk's mini redemption arc. Guy Talk is going through it, as he should be. He arrives at work and his superior P-Lek says that they are going to go to the gun range that day. While scoping out the Ratliff suite, Mook surprises Guy Talk and asked to confirm their date that night. I was surprised that Mook was still interested in this date. It's so hard to read Mook's interest in Guy Talk. I just wish we saw more of her. I mean, Lisa's beautiful, so more of her on the screen, but I just don't know what's going on. I know people say that she's leading Guy Talk on so that she can distract him in the future, but yeah, again, it's like the show isn't giving us enough to even really believe that much. So we'll just have to wait and see. She seems excited about his new gun responsibility, and after she leaves, she goes to the Ratliff estate. He goes into the Ratliff estate. That's Guy Talk. And Guy Talk is successfully able to recover the gun. There was a lot of this tension that the show was trying to build in him recovering the gun, but I kind of felt like he was going to, because in essence, right, like there's no logical point after this other than Guy Talk being fired if he can't get the gun, but he is. And it does seem like people like this, who are kind of flawed in a particular way, but very kind and nice and a great person to be around, they're always lucky. And I'm glad that Guy Talk got his second chance. At the security booth, P-Lek was searching for the gun, and Guy Talk casually says the gun was on his person throughout his rounds. And they go to the gun range to practice shooting, where Guy Talk seems to be a good shot. P-Lek questions whether Guy Talk would have the killer instinct to shoot in an appropriate moment, which I think is foreshadowing for Guy Talk being eager to show that he does in fact have killer instincts, and maybe a moment when killer instincts aren't necessary. Belinda wakes up to porn chai on her belly, while her son Zion is being escorted to her suite. Fortunately, they have this new age parent-child relationship where he just excuses himself and lets Belinda get ready. At breakfast, Zion says that he thinks everyone is getting action except for him. He talks about being stressed by school, and I wonder if there's going to be any romantic tryst on the horizon for Zion, particularly between Piper and Zion. Now, we only have 2 episodes to get this done, and quite frankly, I'd be super frustrated if that is like the reason why Piper says she wants to come back to America, is because, she sees Zion, the very good looking Zion, and it's like, ooh, that's an opportunity. But we'll just have to wait and see. Either way, I do wonder how Zion is going to factor in this entire plot as we move forward. And of course, we saw him in episode 1, so he's clearly going to be somebody who's going to look out for Belinda when maybe other people are preoccupied. Fabian comes to Belinda's breakfast table to invite her to his dinner singing performance. Belinda is clearly still miffed by his dismissal of her concerns about Greg, but says she'll stop by. Belinda and Pornchai report to work, where Pornchai brings up potentially linking up to start a spa business in Thailand. Belinda is initially charmed, but seems anxious when he goes away. Maybe it's because of her prior issues with Tanya, but I could see her fear also being in the prospect of living in Thailand while Greg is on the loose. Then Greg surprises Belinda as she's leaving her work duties and invites her to dinner. Belinda excuses herself by saying that her son's with her, but then Greg's just like, bring the son. And he also insists that they should talk. And here's me hoping that she doesn't pay him any mind. Like this, I know that inevitably Greg and Belinda are going to have some sort of confrontation, but this is a situation where it's just like, okay, you invited me. What are you going to do? Kidnap me? You're going to kidnap me on the White Lotus property? My ass is staying right here. But yeah, for the plot, I guess she's definitely going to probably be at that dinner at Greg's house. Until, yeah, I think with all the action of the last episode, this episode just reminded me that the characters are not firmly rooted outside of their sometimes hackneyed plot lines. It can make it hard to invest in these slower moments simply because I don't care about the characters themselves. And I think a lot of people have been saying, oh, the show's not really slow. It's not slow. I think the thing is, shows are allowed to be slow. But when they're slow, the reason why people usually don't care is because you're deeply invested in these characters. And I don't think these characters were written in a way to make them compelling to the average person. Although I think the show's doing really well in ratings, so I don't think anyone truly cares. But again, really big shout out to Patrick Schwarzenegger, who I think was the standout in this episode. And let me know your thoughts about this episode and what you think about the characters and the plots moving forward. And thank you for watching. This was Strategic Delusion.